You're listening to the Australian Water Association podcast series.
I'm Ellen Fanning and I'm joined by Ryan Brotchie, GHD's Service Line Leader for Integrated Water Management, along with Karey Wills, who's Sewerage Network Operations Engineer at Icon Water, and she completed the work we're discussing today while on secondment in the Strategy and Analytics team. And the paper we're discussing is called Canberra's 50-Year Sewerage Strategy and Adaptive Pathways Approach. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hello.
Let's start at the very beginning. When you were developing a long-term strategy for the ACT sewerage system, what were the sorts of uncertainties that arose in trying to do that longer-term planning?
I think, if you don't mind, I'll have a go at this one. It sort of speaks to what we were thinking or why we were looking at needing an adaptive type strategy. We were looking at the strategy that we'd done in 2010 for the sewage system, and we were sort of 2010 in a sort of 50-year planning horizon isn't that long ago, and looking at all the things that had changed since we'd completed that strategy, and it made us realise that the pace of change in the sort of external environment and even the internal environment is too fast, really, to be making these sort of long-term plans. That trying to predict what's going to happen in 50 years is darn near impossible. And so that's why we sort of turned to these adaptive planning techniques to allow us to create something that we wouldn't have to renew in another 10 years or so, or that would remain sort of live and active over our planning horizon.
And the sorts of trends and shocks that you talk about in the paper relate to things like population growth and land use, how customers behave, societal and environmental perspectives, politics, technology, climate change. So all these variables, in a sense, known unknowns, are floating around in the background as you're trying to make these plans.
Yes, and those are the factors. I think that the one that really stood out from our 2010 plan was something as basic as our population growth in the ACT. We were looking at a very different population growth than what was predicted in that plan, and the pattern of that population in terms of greenfield development and infill densification development as well. So the mix of development we were experiencing was quite different to what we were planning for, only 10 years ago. So all of those factors are changing on, relatively rapidly on this timescale.
So, Karey, when you start then thinking about the concept of a living strategy, what did that mean to the organisation?
It meant that this was something that we weren't expecting to have all of the decisions made and a line drawn under it for this strategy. The way that these adaptive sort of planning tools work is that there's a number of different points that you will get to that will trigger a decision having to be made. And so it sort of creates this iterative planning process where you're sort of you're monitoring the external environment and you're monitoring those metrics that will trigger a decision, and then you're taking that change and you're going back to the plan and you're updating the plan as all of that information comes in. So it's not a static plan that with dates that say when you need to upgrade, for instance, or make some other sort of change. It's a plan that's constantly being renewed and updated, and that's what we were thinking of as it being this living document.
And Ryan, it says in the paper that none of what you developed would have been useful unless they had been communicated and understood by the broader organisation. So when you started, you established the principle of having a highly collaborative approach. Who was in the room in that working group when you sat down to start to develop the strategy?
Doing an adaptive plan is a fundamental shift in the way that strategies are done, and it involves moving away from this sort of fairly rigid and controlled time-based planning to decision-based planning, and that requires a change in the way that a lot of things are done within an organisation. And so, because of that fact, there needed to be a wide range of people in the room, because it doesn't just affect the people who are doing the detailed planning, it affects the people within the organisation who need to make decisions. And being a living plan, it touches all parts of an organisation, and it requires that broad understanding and contribution.
And what an interesting thing to learn, that, it's so obvious, isn't it? But it was so deliberative in the way that you did it, that you're not going to develop a strategy and then try and sell it in the organisation. You're going to do it the other way around. There was a very interesting bit of thinking that went on in terms of sitting down in that workshop and thinking what the critical drivers of change might be, and then kind of putting them into one of two columns and thinking about, well, what would the impact on Icon's ability to deliver services be from that driver, and then what is the uncertainty around that? So just talk to me about that notion of sitting down and scratching your heads collectively and saying, okay, let's think about uncertainty versus impact.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting and I guess a critical process as part of adaptive planning, but also as part of scenario planning exercises. And so that's thinking about what are those uncertainties or those drivers of change and uncertainty that are going to impact you, and thinking about and thinking broadly about which ones may have a material impact, because in a lot of scenario thinking exercises, it's very tempting to get carried away and be blue sky and think about artificial intelligence and robots and a whole range of things that will never actually materially change what you're doing or impact the system that you're working with. And so this is a filtering process. Firstly, it's about whiteboarding and getting all the ideas down on the page, and then going through a prioritization to figure out, what are these drivers? How certain are we that they will occur, or uncertain that they'll occur? And then separately thinking about, okay, well, how does that impact us and what we're trying to do?
And that would be terrific, Ryan, but entirely useless if you then went, we are so clever, this has been a great process, let's put it in the drawer. But instead what you went on to do was identify triggers and thresholds, so that you didn't have to operate with the benefit of hindsight. You could say, well, what are the things that are going to become decision points for us, and how can we anticipate those? Now, how did you get from 5 scenarios to those really concrete points of identifying, these are the thresholds, these are the decision points, these are the triggers for action?
Yeah, and it's a really critical step in the process, and it's probably the most challenging step in the process. And so taking those scenarios, which is often the really fun bit of any of these exercises, thinking broadly about what the future might look like and coming up with some crazy ideas about how your city might look 50 years from now, and then doing that really hard bit of thinking, which is basically how do these scenarios impact us? How does our system perform under these scenarios? And so it's going through that testing exercise. And so, and we like to start with a base case, because that's a line in the sand. And using a base case, we can think about how does our option perform in terms of when does it reach its capacity? When do key assets reach their end of life? When are there sort of biophysical or infrastructure related thresholds or points that are reached in the system that might require you to make a decision, either upgrading something or going down a different path? And that's sort of the first step of decision making. And thinking through that base case thinking, as I'd like to call it, is really important, because it gives you a starting point. And then looking at the different scenarios, we start to layer in some of the other thinking. And we tend to do it by looking at elements of the scenario. So we might focus on a particular variable. So, for instance, government policies on future options, or what happens if an energy or carbon requirement comes in, or regulation of wastewater discharges to river systems is changed. And then just going through that decision test as a group, asking, well, what does this change? Does it change the way that we think about the option? Is the option still viable? Would we need to do anything else to keep the option available? And so it's going through a series of decision tests or thought tests, and actually seeking to understand what would change.
And so that's how you achieve what you call in the paper that fostering of an up and outward approach within the organisation, the whole organisation, to looking at the external environment. What did you have to do once you had developed this strategy to sort of populate that to the organisation, to communicate that, because it's quite a detailed and nuanced approach?
Right from the start of this process, we were focused on communication and how we would communicate this project. And in fact, a big part of it was developing interactive communication materials. And when we're sort of talking about upward and out, the part of the strategy work, it's at the moment it's looking sort of internally, or we were sort of going to internal stakeholders. But we also were thinking to the future that at some point we're going to want to get external buy-in for the way that we're doing our strategy and managing these assets. So we developed a website. Or it's I guess it's a website. It's kind of part of one of our websites that we have already. And to be honest, I'm not actually sure if it's live at this point in time, but it essentially allows you to go through and have a look at how the strategy is developed and look at the different scenarios. And as part of that, we also developed two short videos, explaining how scenario development works and the dynamic adaptive pathways mapping of the diagrams work. And really we knew that for a strategy to be useful, it needs to be understood by the people who need to use it, people who need to, and it's not just that, it's giving a sense of understanding and trust within the organisation and outside the organisation that these plans are going to give us the ability to adapt in a changing environment, and that this sort of planning is robust and it's going to steer us in the right direction into the future. And so there was a lot of having to develop, because they are very new concepts, and like Ryan was saying before, it's sort of a fundamental shift in the way this planning is conducted, that we needed to build that sort of shared vocabulary and build an understanding of how the planning works. And so that's why we focused quite a lot on how it was communicated. And we didn't want it to be a static document that just went out, that was a million pages long and would sit on people's shelves. And so that's this sort of interactive communication piece was how we went about doing that.
Thank you to Ryan Brotchie, GHD's Service Line Leader for Integrated Water Management, and Karey Wills, Sewerage Network Operations Engineer at Icon Water, who completed this work, Canberra's 50-year sewerage strategy and adaptive pathways approach, while she was on secondment in the strategy and analytics team. Thanks to you both.
Thank you very much, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.